Good morning. It's the day of the morning of the takeoff, and I'm just sort of recapping what's going on in the world. I haven't had so much time to dig deeper into everything, and sometimes I just need to focus on the more immediate, family life and being there for my kids and so on. But still, even though this channel is kind of family life thing of I still always try to put in my thoughts about various situations, ideas and so on, and sometimes it's more frequent, sometimes it's less, but right now it's really urgent, basically, because what's going on in Syria. I mean, there are countries in the Middle East that need to get destroyed, which are not part of the Israel-US-Saudi pact. And those, Libya is down, Iraq is down, all stable countries before they were destroyed. More than 1 million people have been killed, and who knows how many will had their lives destroyed and will die because of some injuries or various traumas and so on. In a sense, it's already a world war, and it's been going on ever since the scam and lies about the weapons of mass destruction. And that time many people bought into it. This time people don't buy into it. All these sort of chemical accusations of Assad and Syria, it's so diffuse, nobody knows what's going on, nothing is really presented out in the clear. And people, I think many people were even aware of the scam when the NATO pact, including NATO proxies like Sweden, destroyed Libya, a stable country. But at that time, I think many who were on the fence realized that their governments will just never listen to them anyway. The big decision, the big war drum, mega shekel rattling decisions are made above our heads. So a spy gets poisoned or something in England, and that is something that probably happens more frequent than we think, and suddenly the whole world is against Russia. Everybody's kicking out their diplomats. And I'm not a fan of Russia more than I'm a fan or not a fan of any other country. But if you look at the border of Russia, you can see EU, the European Union, Europe, we're all part of the Western pact. We have surrounded Russia, basically. We have surrounded Iran too, which is the last stronghold. And Syria is something of a bug, because it was supposed to be destroyed by the US-Israeli created terror network of ISIS, because they gave them weapons. ISIS never attacked Israel, and when they accidentally shot some grenades over the border, they apologized, and Israel has been taking care of injured ISIS soldiers, which is really odd. So we in the West failed in destroying Syria and Assad's democratic regime. So what's to do next? Is it to give up and realize mission failed, or is it to continue? And it appears that the next step is to continue this scam and attack the Syrian army, basically, and that's what Trump is doing. And Trump got elected because he was the compared to Clinton, she was really an open book, an open crook, basically. Trump said everything everybody wanted to hear, and maybe he had good intentions, but the presidents are only there to be in the front. They all, as candidates, swear allegiance to Israel, and no other country does that around the world. I mean, if I'm to be the president of a country, I don't swear an allegiance to some other country. Why should I do that? And Trump is just doing what he's ordered to do, so there's no point in being focused on the presidents or the leaders, because it's always something behind them that rules them. And Trump's victory was inevitable, because there was so much frustration being built up. So yeah, and he took the points from that, because people would rather have a crook who's not an open crook, who has not been proven to be a crook in the public office, rather than have a public office crook who has been proved to be a crook for years. But I digressed a bit. So basically, how will this situation result? I mean, if the US and if USA and Russia engage in Syria, that means they will also engage in Alaska and over there in the Far East. Will they engage in space? Maybe one thing that sort of keeps this all from escalating is the fact that Russians are the only ones sending up people in space at the moment. So they need to be diplomatic. But on the other hand, we in the West are doing everything to freeze out Russia. You know, sanctions and always this sort of blaming them for everything. You know, every election, every decision which is bad is the Russian spies, as if we didn't have the same hackers and spies in their country. So, and that's surprising because, I mean, as I said, I'm not a fan of Russia or Putin and something. I love Russians, you know, I love all people of European ancestry, basically. Why shouldn't I? It's my homeland. I think we should be more united. I think we should befriend one another more and have much more open trade with each other. But anyway, I'm not a fan of their system, or, you know, I'm not here to praise them or and such. But it's quite obvious that there's been an escalation of all of these countries sort of going against Russia. And of course, the response will be natural. They will, you know, feel themselves attacked, and their media, mainstream media, will go in the direct opposite direction. So, is a world war possible if it escalates in Syria? I mean, remember World War I? It began, they say, in Sarajevo when Gavrilo Princip shot the Kaiser. But it was building up long time before. That was the good excuse. That was the good sort of tip of the cake or something, you know, like the cherry on the cake to sort of, okay, that's a fine thing. That's the good reason enough. Will the same happen in Syria? In a sort of accumulative way, you know, Russians are helping Assad, and Assad is and his regime in Syria has to be destroyed, just like Iraq, Libya, and all those other countries. And that is worth everything, apparently. Why? I mean, it's quite obvious why, because it's part of the resources in the Middle East. It's part of the Israel interest in having their neighbors destroyed, besides Saudis, who are an ally of them, basically, and Jordan, which is sort of keeping a low profile. So, you know, the West gets the resources, Israel gets their enemies destroyed, and all kinds of pipelines and various interest puppet governments. But even that has failed. You know, look at Libya. It's a mess. Iraq is a mess. It all became a mess after this sort of democratization process which the US enforces on countries. I mean, if we look at Russia, they are not they're not better than anybody else, but you don't see them getting engaged in Portugal, in Southern America, in Africa, and something like that with soldiers. What is the United States doing over in Syria, Iraq, and all those countries for all of these years? I mean, we have become so acclimatized, basically naturalized into this perpetual war that we wouldn't even notice if a world war broke up. I mean, the only thing that would change is like, oh, I'm affected, you know, my country is involved. But when you have, you know, at least 1 million people dead, that's Iraq, and you know, how many people more injured, destroyed, and will have their lives ruined, and the infrastructure, you know, for example, just like Bosnia and Herzegovina, it had 3 wars in 100 year period. I mean, that takes a lot of energy to rebuild, you know, and so on. And these countries have been destroyed for the last 15, now it's not like 16, 17 years. And why basically? Because I can remember a time like between 2000 and 2007, the world was kind of settling in. I know the scam of the weapons of mass destruction and so on, but you had a sense of everything was sort of becoming more relaxed. And why is all this tension coming up right now, basically? Why is it so important to destroy Assad's government and destroy Syria? Why is it so important to oppose Russia? I mean, every country has their sort of dirty secret things going on with trade deals, with blackmails and so on, but we don't need a war, we don't need a conflict. And it's really close this time around. And I also, just for the digression, I read the Norwegian report for the sort of defense ministry and national security for 2018. And it was all about Russia, and then when it came to the sort of cyber and IT stuff, it was also all about Russia, and then it had something about, you know, peacekeeping and so on in you know, forgotten African countries. And anyway, and even when I talk to people about Russia, when you mention them, some people are really, even though they sort of think of themselves to be informed, you know, they're not, because they really have this sort of demonic picture of Russians, like they can choose their the best for themselves, you know, they are suffering under this tyrant of Putin. I mean, who are we suffering here in the West from? We have the, you know, the international bankers. That's a really juicy thing that's going on in the West. I mean, we have the leaders switching around every 4th, 5th year, but, you know, we are really governed by the mega shekel weapons industry, right? And I mean, even countries like Sweden, who still claim to be, who still claims to be neutral, was involved in Libya, is involved in Afghanistan, and as I did a video some weeks ago, they were talking and were ready to go into eastern Ukraine and, you know, be on the border against Russians. And that was because, you know, NATO can't do it, because that would be too much of a bad PR. So they need to send their proxy member, Sweden, and so on. So yeah, I mean, somebody's really like looking for every reason to build up a tension in the world between countries which have no reason to be in conflict. I mean, Syria, leave it alone. It will become fine once again. Leave Russia, leave Europe. I mean, everybody just leave everybody alone for a bit. But that's not the interest. And I mean, that's how it goes. Every country which is not in the total submission of the international banking system, and their juicy ideas, you know, are put on some heavy test, you know, get into submission or get destroyed or removed. So yeah, I mean, and this is also a thing that I just want to end the video with. It's almost 14 minutes. I mean, the USA, we still have, I mean, look at the country. It's been involved in so many wars over the last 100 years only, and we still sort of perceive it as to be the sort of beacon of righteousness and perfection. And you have patriots in the United States that want to restore the sort of old school republic idea of the country, getting back to the Constitution, you know, leaving other countries alone, focusing on America first. That's what Trump said, and people bought that because that's what they wanted to hear. But you know, he's the swamp of the swamp with the people around him. Anyway, I mean, who will replace United States? You know, and United States is the muscle for various interests. Like for Israel, for example, what will happen to Israel when United States becomes the second or third in the world? eventually, who knows? Because so much money that they have wasted, and so much life and frustration of their own people, Americans, you know, who went to fight in Iraq, Afghanistan, and later on became veterans, you know, depressed, and every day they're like killing themselves. And this is a common theme. Veterans are always treated like basically garbage. Besides some heroes here and there, most of them just, they get forgotten, because all of these people involved in the mega shekel weapons industry around the world, they never ever get their, you know, finger cuts in any of this. It's people like me, you, and our children, and everybody else's sons that has to be killed and destroyed and brainwashed. So basically, what can one do? One can sit and one can read about this. At least what one can do is to talk about it, because that's the chain reaction that governs the world, and that's the power that we have as individuals, as common people. You know, for me as a father, I can't be active all of the time, and sometimes I can, sometimes I just don't have the time, but I can always talk to people. If somebody brings this up, I'll share my point of view, and even if they don't want to hear or are not interested, okay, the camera cut me off, and I'll just continue. So as individuals, we can always talk about this to real people who are, you know, more or less informed. It doesn't matter. You can always sort of bring it up if the subject gets brought up, because people have a tendency, I've seen, and I'm talking about people who are really still, you know, 95% in the mainstream propaganda. They will bring up a headline or something, and I will always go in and talk about things, you know, just lay my points. And I can see sometimes people are interested, sometimes not. Sometimes it's too mind-blowing for them, or just confusion. I see confusion in their eyes when you bring about various aspects. But I know that that's an accumulative effect. And without even doing that sort of simple, most basic stand of talking to people, and not just you know, applauding ideas online or and so on, which is also a good thing, because this is a good platform. You know, talking to real people, getting them aware, because maybe next time they want to send young, healthy, smart men off to war. Maybe the tides will sort of be big enough for that not to happen. Maybe. And when it happens once, for real, maybe that will just show us that actually that can happen anytime, when we realize that the interest for wars are, if ever, legit. I mean, there are always, there are rare cases of, you know, pure aggressions and hatred. But in our modern day and age, after 2001, 9/11, it's been so obviously it's all just a scam. Yeah, okay, enough talking. The battery light is blinking. But just, you know, keep talking. Talk to real people. Dare to mention your ideas and push it a bit, you know, just push it a little bit. Don't make people too upset, but just push it, inform them. That's the thing we can do, actually. It costs nothing. It takes time, which you're still anyway spending with someone you're talking to. Take care and all the best. Ciao.